OOCS, Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 126. Love and Longing. Vernon notes as he checks his message. Something wrong? His Miro Noir asks him. Apparently they want things to be thoroughly checked in Guran and want my expertise to make sure they've got everything. He answers. The Call of Duty is a song that shouldn't be refused, Miro Noir says, and he sighs, kisses her, nuzzles little Arinoir, and blows a kiss to her napping sisters. Then he is gone. Well, I suppose there are some upsides to your being so fussy. Her eldest squirms a little, not understanding her yet, but knowing the tone was a happy mommy, and happy mommy means a happy Airy. So where are we? Vernon asks as he appears between Daiki and Daiju, with his arms resting on the shoulders of either Koga. Ah, the Bloody Prophet. Excellent. We are cutting out this cancer in the heart of Guran. Your expertise as a transmutation adept is needed to ensure we have all infested tissue from this metaphorical tumor. Heart Guran says, and Vernon nods. Are we searching for anything specific or just anything that does not clearly belong? Vernon asks. The second, Heart Guran says, and Vernon nods before crouching down and placing his hand on the floor. It had once had a carpet on it, but that had been freshly taken away. Concrete, unevenly dispersed, wooden support beams, reinforcing bars, the entombed bodies of numerous small creatures, primarily insects, bubbles and gaps. This building was made in a rush and will not last out the century. It appears I need to give my building inspectors a scare. About 3 dozen different preservation runes making up for the poor quality of materials and workmanship, wiring that's maybe 3 months away from needing replacement, vandalized energy monitor, and there we go. We've got something. 7 o'clock, 5 meters where the wall meets the ceiling. Small hollow, several items inside. Likely communicators. It just doesn't end, does it? Heart Guran asks as Daiju steps away with Daiki, and they quickly search the area. Apparently not. I'm widening the search area further and further. But it's a lot of information and takes a bit to sort through, so we may be here for a short while. Take your time. I'd rather be thorough than quick. Good outlook, Vernon compliments as he furrows his brow and focuses. There's neither seam nor latch to open this hollow, Daiju calls over. There isn't one, but there is a hollow. Your hand is right over it. Phase it through, Vernon replies. Got it, Daiju answers as he starts passing communicators to Daiki. That's all of them, Vernon says after the fourth one. Anything else? Heart Guran asks after Vernon goes quiet. Some drop coins among the foundation for some reason, but so far nothing else in the building itself. Should I scan the entire thing or just this section? The whole thing, and the coins are no concern. It's considered good luck to bless a building site with some coin. A bribe for spirits to leave the building intact. Odd that they followed that tradition, but none of the proper building code. It's all in tritite if that means anything. So they scrimped on the blessing too? Fantastic, Heart Guran growls. He then looks from left to right as the Barless are very quiet and up against the walls. Oh, right, the Bloody Prophet. Yeah, and they can relax. I'm not here for them and I'm in a good mood. Vernon notes, and that oddly enough does not calm down the Barless. Can we wait outside? Jate Barless asks. You may, Heart Guran says, and they clear out behind him. He chuckles ruefully. How courageous. I may or may not have traumatized them, Vernon remarks blandly. Considering they're the victims of your sorceress rampage, being alive alone is a blessing, Heart Guran notes. Somehow I doubt they see it that way. After all, now they live in fear with the knowledge that their children are in my power. You've done what? Their children are wards of the Dark Forest? So they're wards of sorcerers? All sorcerers? Technically, as well as the trees, grass, moss, flowers, beasts, and birds and fungus. Everything alive within the Dark Forest is seeing to their safety, education, and health. That's either the most terrifying or inspiring thing I've ever heard. How many are sorcerers themselves? There are a few, 3 per family, but hundreds of children. How do you stop them from fighting? They're in the forest. If they try to fight, they're instantly separated, and if they're naughty, they've been made to sit in timeout corners. It's hard to get off the stool when the moment you hop off, you land back on it. Not that it doesn't stop some of them from having fun with it. But there you go, Vernon remarks before frowning. There's sinkhole liable to start up in the parking lot. It won't be in place for a long time, but this whole strip mall needs to be decommissioned and demolished, Hart Garan says in frustration. I don't suppose you could be hired to systematically check every building and foundation in Al Rush. That would take a very, very long time. I'm just one person, and the only way I have to bring the full forest in with me to help would very much compromise the structures, even the well-built ones. I suppose roots growing everywhere would be an issue, Hart Garan concedes. Have you found anything else? Some deep stains in the parking lot hint that a lot of vehicles are improperly maintained. There are breakage patterns hinting that things are not being handled with sufficient care. Chips of wood where they lay their pallet and nothing else. Sorry, just the one hollow as best I can tell. Anything else must have already been taken when you cleared this place out. Good, I like being thorough. Are you sure there's nothing of note in the other parts of the strip mall? Beyond places that have gone unmaintained for a little too long and aren't being cleaned as thoroughly as they should, nothing else. Incidentally, don't try the red meat from the opposite end of the mall. They're not cleaning things as they should. Health inspector, then, Hart Garan says as he makes a little note. Thank you for your time, Sorcerer Shay. I know how attached you are to your wife, all of Serbo does, and I won't keep you from her any longer. Vernon snaps off a salute and then is gone in a woodwalk. She sighs as the arms reach around her again. She had just moved the little ones outside for them to have some time in the sun and on a blanket in the grass. Finished your work? I am indeed. Duke Garan is wrestling with some fools in his duchy and asked for a final sweep to make sure he had everything from them. Lucky him, he called me, for there was a hidden cache of communicators. Do you know what's happening? He's looking to defend his shattered family and has gone from a defensive stance to an aggressive one. Rooting out all agents of his enemies he can find, I expect him to make examples soon. Really, it's rare for male heirs to show that level of viciousness, Miro Noir notes. Rarer still for an entire family to fall on a single male heir. Vernon answers as he slips out of his socks. Incidentally, no one noticed, or if they did, they failed to comment on the fact I had socks and no shoes on. Either way, a silly image for the Grand Dread Sorcerer to show up without shoes on but socks, Miro Noir notes as Vernon's foot slinks outward and he begins tickling the bellies of whatever babes are close enough to reach. Yes, because we sorcerers are strict adherents of the status quo and fashion. I believe it was I that taught you about that, my love. I take what you tell me to heart, my love, Vernon assures her. Still, I can't help but wonder just how many more heads Duke Garan is going to collect. He strikes me as the type to make very definite statements. Oh yes, he's a Garan through and through. I've did well in my history courses. The Garan family produces leaders like the current Duke on occasion. As a family, they are reasonable and dutiful, but then one snaps and reveals nothing but sharp edges and cold will. They went from farmer to knight to baroness to duchess through such people. Really, a common farmer tracking down and challenging a knight to a duel by calling her craven, cruel and childish in front of her lady is the sort of thing that grabs attention. Even more so when the farmer outright destroys the knight in a calculating fury. Then the descendant of that farmer having been knighted going out and tracking down entire bandit clans in cold fury before tracking it all back to traitors? You best believe that when Garan grow cold, those that know their history sit up and pay attention. Really? I contemplated approaching him and Miro Noir begins to say, and Vernon frowns and turns that over. Relax, I decided not to, and I'm very glad I didn't. I know, I just don't know what to think about it, Vernon says before huffing. His loss. Miro Noir giggles slightly as she cuddles into him, and he nuzzles into her hair. Very much his loss. And my gain, Miro Noir says as her tail wraps around his waist. Our gain, he says. It's color-coded, all of it. A row of data slates, each one with a little colored tag. Red is the smallest, followed by purple, then green, then white. What do the colors mean? White is technically a crime, but a waste of a judge's time. You won't get them for more than a fine. Green, ecological damage that you can fine them for severely. Purple is any crime we found in the felony range, Guaranteed forfeiture of assets and jail time at minimum. And red, Hart Garan asks, knowing full well it likely pertains to personal injuries. Something pertaining to you and yours. Anyways, here is your pretty little row. They're all contained and ready for you in the dark forest to be called to you at your leisure. Good, where was the biggest cache? The communicators, actually. They led to private servers that had the really juicy bits. The things in the white section and half of green was what was found outside them. If not for that find, we wouldn't be able to prove anything beyond someone wanted them to bribe others and no proof they actually did. We have their command on document. They can still claim ignorance and kick up issues in the court. They could if they weren't being tried in my land under my laws where I can guarantee they get everything they deserve. True, but by wrapping this up with a pretty little bow on it, not even your most dedicated detractors can mount any proper complaint about this. Meaning you can give them everything. Very true, well played and well reasoned. So how do you plan on dealing with your attackers? You have some minor members in your own family, and I doubt they'll be of much value as a hostage. Hostage? Oh, you think we'll play that way? Cute. But no. No. I'm going to bleed them without even holding the blade. Hart Garan says after a little thought. After all, they all look upon me and mine and see a prize to be won. I'm not a player, I'm the game board, so it's time to enact a penalty. What are you getting at? I don't have to win this game with my enemies. I just have to make sure none of them win, and there's no better way to accomplish that than to set 2 or more players against one another. What are you getting at? Everyone has political rivals. Everyone. Which means that if the rivals of Darv suddenly find out that Darv is making moves to empower itself, they're going to counter-move to nullify or undo the power gain. Either way, that will take Darv's attention away for a time. But they're not the only problem. Sarla and Farlet? They have the strongest claim alongside Darv. If I fall, technically Sarla's is the strongest due to my eldest being of Sarla blood. And beyond that, several more whose blood is in me. If Sarla, Farlet, and Darv are all unable to take power over Garan, then the Erardin followed by the core can make moves. Those are distant duchies. Yes, but thanks to who my father is and who his father is, it all ties back to me, which means it ties to each of my daughters as well. The forest has no knowledge of such dynastic struggles going so far back. Oh, they do, but often such information is kept from others. Dukes, or as we were known in the olden days, kings, rarely were the direct enemies of sorcerers, but the game board shifting over generations at their behest created a few sorcerers. Burnstone is one. Really? Yes, thankfully the core are too intelligent to poke the sleeping sorcerer. They've accepted the losses they've accrued when their lessers created him generations back and avoided further harm. I see. But please tell me that you didn't just inform Burnstone of this. I don't want to turn him into a second bone chewer. He just wants to know how the core are responsible, because that's a question that isn't loaded like a railgun, rated to crack continents. I got too comfortable talking to you. You did. Fine. What happened long ago is that the core allowed one of their underlings to provoke a small skirmish and stayed hands-off. Then some years after the dust settled, the victorious party and then the provoking party were destroyed by the sorcerer, later known as the Burnstone. That's it? They let others do something? For some people, that's enough. By your reaction, Burnstone cares little? Everyone involved is long dead, so he was more morbidly curious as to what kind of insane blame is to go round. Are you implying he isn't currently researching to see if there are any survivors of the core from that time? No, he's not. He finished about 5 seconds before you asked, he says, and Hart Garan smirks. Well, as fun conversation has been, I assume I'm about to get very, very upset. Excuse me, Hart Garan says, grabbing the first red-marked data slate. 10 seconds later, and there is the cracking of breaking wood as he grips the armrest of his chair far, far too tightly for it to endure. His expression is almost serene as the end of the chair is slowly mulched in his grasp. OOCS, Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 127. Not exactly hidden. I must say, this is a little more than I was expecting. The Empress notes, there is a neat little row in front of her that she is scanning through. Still waters run deep, it seems. I always love to see under the placid-looking surface that my nobles like to present to me. She takes a sip of her drink, even as she browses through the list. Do remind Duke Garan that open warfare is not permitted. He has to be cunning in his retaliation. Is provoking his enemies into attacking each other cunning enough? Daiju asks. Barely. If he were even a hair more blatant, I would be disappointed. But what can one expect from a provoked Garan, the Empress asks. You have a history of them? They were an amusing part of my own education, and, well, technically I have some relation to all the nobility of Serbo, but the Garan are either no trouble to deal with at all, or in the process of culling their foes. Have you been here for a culling? His great-great-great-grandmother was like him. A duel went out of control and her husband was badly injured. He survived, but she ruined her opponent's life. Vindictive. Oh yes. Little Heart isn't going to stop at just one retaliation. They have a habit of spilling a gallon of blood for every drop that was taken from them. And considering that numerous distant members of his family have been slaughtered, and then it all being covered up, her husband says, oh yes, we're getting a show. So long as our primary actor remembers the rules. No open warfare or outright assassination. Even though he could and will argue that his own side has been assassinated in many ways. Tell him that I see this as a trial. The Garan are weakened after all. He seems to have the old strength, but it's more than strength that makes a noble. Does he have restraint as well? Knowing when and where to place his wrath and how to measure it properly is important. I'll pass that to him. Oh, will you? Interesting. Daiju rolls his eyes before he swipes a folded slice of meat. It's vaguely folded into the shape of a letter. Literal poetry making up her meal is quite the artistic flair. One Daiju finds over the top. Trying to say something? Yes, I am hungry. I require more food than you, Apuk, and I've let a meal pass me by for this report. Oh dear, can't have that, can we? She asks, and he steals another slice off her plate, then uses it to wrap around a nutrition bar. Daiju chuckles at the look on her face. Do you have to bring out such things at a meal? They're horrible, her husband protests. They're perfectly healthy, Daiju says before crunching down and seeming to relish the taste. You're doing well to fight the urge to gag, the Empress says, and Daiju simply waggles his eyebrows before finishing his mouthful. Seeing as how neither of us is going to take the bait of the other, I'm going to pass your message along. Farewell, Daiju says before taking another crunchy bite of his meat-wrapped nutrition bar. The Empress leans to her husband and lets out a giggle at last. He almost got me crunching into that awful nutrition bar. Almost got you? He was getting me. He returns and she laughs lightly before they tuck into their meal again. The first thing Daiju sees is the fact that an iron ball is being used as a stress ball, and that the otherwise calm and in-control-looking Hart Garan has embedded his fingerprints into the solid metal. There was a large chair that had been removed by the quietly hovering house staff, and Daiju walks up to them before being yanked close. What is going on? He has nearly shut everyone and everything out, and now he's acting like this, the headmaid demands. He's furious, finding out his family has been attacked in more ways, and if you'll excuse me a moment, Daiju says before turning away and putting a hand next to his mouth. The Empress wants to remind you that open warfare and blatant assassinations are not to be used. Even though there's been all but outright assassinations against branches of my own family? The key words are all but. Keep things at that level. Oh, I'll keep things at that level all right. These wretches will be all but extinct by the time I'm through with them. They'll be all but begging for mercy before I'm finished, and their stories will be all but screamed from the rooftops as an example as to why you must never so much as think of attacking my family again. Daiju walks over and puts a hand on the man's back, then feels around for a moment before sending a small touch of axiom into a certain spot. Hart Garan rears back and then relaxes a little. Calm mind for a calm decision. Take control of your own mind or be ruled by emotion. Put the reports down, sink into the chair, and let your mind empty. And if I do not, you will make more mistakes, and every mistake you make puts your family in greater and greater risk. Do you want to contribute to the end of the Garan or divert it? I see. Any advice? If you cannot clear it, then imagine a hole within your mind. Throw in anything that distracts or disturbs you. That will help calm you and clear your mind. I see. Thank you, Hart-Garan says before pausing. Then he shakes his head and leans back in his chair. At first huffing in fury, then quickly growing calm. He opens his eyes again. That did help. He's gently pushed back in. Daiju shakes his head. You've only calmed the surface. Still yourself fully so you may make truly wise choices. How long? Give yourself an hour at least. Very well, Hart-Garan says as he sets a timer on his communicator and then leans back in his chair. After a few moments, Daiju steps away and rejoins the household staff. How did you? He trusts me. Not the wisest course of action, but useful for both him and us in the here and now. Why is trusting you unwise? The head of the guard demands, her hand inching to a small rail-shot pistol. I was sent by the Empress, not called for by Hart-Garan. Therefore my intentions are first to serve the will of the Empress, not serve those of the Guran. Makes sense. But she has ordered you to assist us, the guard states as her hand is now resting on the pistol. Yes, but it's still unwise to trust the servant of another in a trying time, Daiju remarks. And your advice of meditation? Considered a foundational requirement back home. If you cannot control yourself, body and mind, then how can you control your destiny, and how can you change it if you cannot control it? Daiju asks. He certainly has a will to him, but if his desire for revenge overwhelms his good sense, he's going to get himself killed. I can't quite shut you out that much, Hart-Garan states. Then take my advice when I say calm down so you don't kill yourself, Daiju calls back. Boldness and audacity is far stronger when married to cunning and clear thought. Perhaps we could speak elsewhere to avoid disturbing the master, the head guard asks, and Daiju nods before following them out of the room and down the hallway somewhat. All right, listen well. He has been pulling from us, testing us against each other, and increasingly paranoid. Why? You mean beyond the increasing evidence of conspiracy and treachery inside his duchy? Daiju asks. Or finding those conspiracies working to blind him to allow his enemies to move freely? Of course he's paranoid. He's just thrown aside a curtain and found a wall detailing conspiracy to tear him apart. Metaphorically, at least. What can we do to help him? Go along with any and all investigations and don't hold it against him. He used a half-dozen different agencies to try and make sure that he would catch something if something was off, and he's now found that they were all compromised. It's not doing good things for his sense of security or safety, to say nothing of the numerous hidden chambers and passages I found in his own home. It's never ending. It's been 10 years since everything was destroyed, and it will only end when things are secure and strong again. And even then, it'll only die down. I know that now. I just thought the other nobles would have the decency to give him some space after such tragedy. Not descend upon an injured member of their own class like scavenger hounds onto a wounded pup. One of the maids says, bristling. Were we on Earth, I would say it's human nature. But we're on Serbo and it just seems to be nature itself. Those looking to be strong can and will descend upon the weak and meek to try and fatten themselves. Daiju says, it's wrong. True, but oftentimes the only way to survive it is to get away when it happens. Are you ready to run should the worst happen? What? How can you even... The head guard begins, but Daiju's grin tells her exactly what she needs to know. You're testing us now. Pay attention and anything can be a test. It's legitimate advice. My family was hired in the past to help out with, let's call them similar situations. We weren't in a hurry to die with our employers. Remember, no matter how shining and glorious the nobles may seem to be, their wars are not yours. You may fight in them, but you didn't start them, and you won't benefit nearly as much from them as they will. So you want us to turn our backs on our Lord? No, but don't sell your soul for someone who won't return the favor. You have your own lives and families to care for, your own dreams and goals to chase. You have the right to seek glory and happiness too, Daiju says earnestly. This is another test, isn't it? Whether it's a test or not doesn't matter. It's legitimate advice. It's very easy to dismiss the other or the lesser, And what is the serving class to the nobles, if not a lesser other? Are you sowing sedition or testing loyalty? I will not stand for this any longer. I will inform the master about your attempt to poison us against him. A maid says, rushing back even as the head guard draws her pistol on him. He smiles. Sir, the Cretan sent by the Empress is trying to turn us against you? What? I am explaining facts that test their loyalty, and their first impulse is to run to you and hold a weapon to me. You can carry them in your faith, Daiju calls over with a smile. Is everything an insane test? The maid screams at him. Everything can be, he calls back. What I said was true. The games of nobles can leave many smaller folk dead at the roadside, and it is often considered a simple cost. There is no greater way to lose loyalty than to leave it unanswered. Don't you dare imply I would ever do such a thing, Hart Garan says now, standing in the doorway. Good. Loyalty for loyalty. Your retainers are as clean as I can determine, without resorting to some extreme invasions of privacy and security. Treat them well, and they shall return the favor, Daiju says before smiling. But if the histories of your people, my people, and to be frank, all peoples are to be trusted, then no one should ever be fully trusted. Are you trying to calm me or make me more paranoid? It's not paranoia if you truly do have a conspiracy of enemies out to get you, and they are coming for you from all angles. You need to be cautious and cunning. What more can I do? Keep moving forward. I'm just reminding you of the danger you're confronting, Daiju states. I don't need a reminder. Do you? You've been focused on treachery and not the fact that this isn't some exceptional, out-of-nowhere situation. This is a pattern that has followed a pattern that you well know, Daiju says, and Hart Garan's face hardens. What happens when a lord shows great weakness? 3 things can happen, all to their detriment. They can be used, they can be plundered, and they can be destroyed. The Empress is getting in the way of destruction. You're seeing how you're being used and moving against it, which leaves, how are they plundering my duchy? That good Duke is the right question. The Empress won't allow destruction. With my gathering my children to me, they cannot simply use me. So how are they plundering? Well, Daiju prompts, I need to look over some bank statements and contracts. OOCS, Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 128, Not Exactly Hidden. And so, Daiju asks after Hart Garan's 2-hour power study session. It's clever. It's also small, and the sort of thing that if not found early can become a big problem. But where are the multiple other attacks distractions from this? Was this a distraction from them? Or was it all just a massive number of attacks with this portion being just one of many prongs? That doesn't actually answer the question as to what the attack is. It's in the expiring contracts, essentially buried in the midst of lists of things that are being allowed to expire are numerous patents and production rights. I need to run some more numbers, but if my initial impression is correct, this could cripple the Garan economy. By restricting patents, they could open you up to being sued for copyright infringement of all kinds, just on simple production, and legally demand that you stop all production of a certain product. Get it in enough base products and you can no longer produce them at home, massively increasing cost and, in the end, breaking the economy. Not quite, but it's a crippling blow that could take decades, if not centuries, to fully recover from. Hart Garan explains before smiling. The strength and weakness of an attack like this is that it's not a single blow, it's many hundreds of tiny cuts. Countering each one takes its own effort, and a few small cuts are easily lost in the confusion and panic. But if they are all accounted for, then each one can be easily countered. You have a defense? Yes, and it needs not a mighty shield or bulwark, but instead a solid suit of chainmail. I did not know that Apuk used chainmail in the past. We didn't. However, I did make a brief study of human military history. How brief? An hour or two of lightly browsing the information plundered from the newest species to bumble into the galaxy. Makes sense. So what's the plan? I'm going to call a large number of my captains of industry and inform them of the problem, and then my answer to it. Tax cuts for anyone who finds a legal patent by another species similar to, if not identical to the ones they're already using. A higher one for those bold enough to market it as an exotic new change to bring some extra spice to the life of Serbo. If that works, your tax intake might go up rather than down, even with the cuts, Daiju notes in an amused tone. Exactly, it's the fun part of the economic section of the game. There's an actual way to measure success for definitive results. Some people spend their whole lives just trying to fully understand it, and giving them a bit of your own favor lets you use their expertise with ease, Hardgurin says with a nod. This is going to piss them off. Yes, but I doubt species like yours will care much about the dynastic squabbling of the Apok. Not to mention there are numerous laws to prevent interference with outspecies on top of the risks of getting in legal trouble outside of Serbo, which would be seen as downright disgraceful by the rest. Allowing public perception to shield you from the majorities of counters to your counters. Yes, and no doubt someone will find some kind of counter even with all this. But there's only so many moves one can plan in advance with any true reliability. The nature of people being what it is makes these games too unpredictable to truly plan things out in such advance. Master plotters that can read a person's entire history and get an accurate prediction of their future are either doing so in only the broadest terms and with limited at best success, or are works of fiction themselves. Things are still in motion. Correction. Right now I'm on defense, but I'm watching for a chance of my own. Who's to say this isn't a potential retaliation in the making as well? Most strikes in physical combat leave an opponent open if they're properly countered in some way. What to say these won't be the same? Likely they are, but without access to knowing just how important these patents are to my rivals, I have no way of knowing how vulnerable they've made themselves from this. I'll still be retaliating, but they'll be swings in the dark, meaning ones I cannot offer the amount of force I'd like to them. Otherwise, I'll leave myself open. Very good. There's just one more thing to consider. My children, your children, make them part of this. Trust me, it will be worth it, Daiju offers. You think they're ready for this? Whether they are or not, respecting them and making them part of things will bring them closer to you. Some might never be ready to engage politics at this level. Children are not their parents and have different ambitions, dreams, and desires. You might never see eye to eye with them, but if you conceal nothing from them, then they will at least know you are honest with them. Let them learn from you, Daiju says, and Hardgurin considers for a few moments, then smiles. They had been called by their duke. They had been called and they had only entered to find themselves intimidated. 3 new heads were atop his manor's outer wall. Fresh Apuk heads. A small sign denoting them as traitors hung next to them, and the blood was still wet. It didn't get better passing through. There was a small army of Apuk in stasis with a simple sign stating, awaiting judgment, next to them. So going to speak to a nobleman with a tendency to solve things in one of the most definitive ways imaginable was not comfortable, especially when her business was all ready. The door is open before them, and waiting for them in the entrance hall is Hardgurin, Duke of Guran, and a man not to be taken lightly. A man surrounded by his young daughters, many of them old enough to be his sisters rather than children. As she crosses the threshold, she is momentarily struck by just how young the feared Duke is. And this man should be worried about parties, rumors, and whatever silly trouble he can get into and out of, not leading the economy, security, and culture of an entire duchy. Even compared to the humans that emerged from cruel space, he's young, barely an adult by any standard, and yet still in charge, because no one else is left to do it. He waits for everyone to enter and nods to them all before turning around without a word and leading them all to the room between the main stairs. Inside, that is a large meeting hall with table, the sort of thing you would find in any movie about the olden times before first contact, where lords and ladies would plot the course of entire nations, where wars were decided. Neither movies nor business meeting halls could come close to the sheer sensation of history and strength emanating from this old room with older trophies decorating the walls. Broken blades taken from the bodies of enemies. Majestic shell armor rent in two by the force of a warrior's blows. Documents of surrender, captured banners and writs of ownership and trade. Surrounded by this is a single formal sword, so old it has not the spikes of a traditional warblade, so old its size is downright puny, as it was earned before the widespread adoption of axiom combat. Older than every other trophy. The runed weapon was part of a tradition no longer followed, the thrice-gifted blade. A weapon broken over a hated enemy, reforged and gifted to a lord alongside the loyalty of the wielder, who would break it again and then remake it into a symbol of their vaunted nobility. Few had the power to break a blade over an enemy in those days. Less had the humility to swear to a lord after doing so, and of those rare few that accomplished all that, only a handful survived long enough for their lords to recognize them as truly worthy knights. It is said that the Guran's sword was gifted to them when a simple farmer woman lost one of her daughters to a corrupt soldier in her lady's army. She stole one of the soldier's two swords and killed her with it, breaking the blade against her opponent, and then reforged it and apologized for the damage to the only thing of worth with the soldier. She had been hired as a warrior on the spot and served for 30 years. Then upon her deathbed, the daughter of her lady presented her with the blade remade again and elevated the woman and her daughters to knighthood. Her grave was still on the family grounds. The family had made a point of keeping track of it. Most museums struggle to have a gallery half so well stocked or storied. "Please be seated," Hart Goran states. "My lord, what is this about?" "We are under attack is what this about, and I am going to show you how it's being done so that we may repel the blow." Attack? But if it's war, then why are we here? I'm not a fighter. I run a business. I own steel mills and several chemical plants. "Allow me to clarify," Hart Goran says as he guides his children into their own seats. "We are under economic attack. All of your industries and businesses are being affected, and as your duke, it is my duty to aid you in this time of need. There is a problem, and there is a solution I will help you with. If you find my answer insufficient, then we will seek out a better one together." "The patents? Very well spotted, yes. I can nearly guarantee you that the failure of your business partners to renew contracts with you and refuse payment to allow you to continue to use the recipes, patents, and processes ties back into the fact that the baronies and duchies surrounding Goran sense weakness now that my family has been culled to the point that I am the most senior member. The heads outside? Working for them. The ones on the spikes bribe the ones still in stasis to send reports relating to my family to them, first for redaction and modification, all to throw me off the scent that my line was being slowly culled. Your family's line, someone mutters. I am head of my family. All branches are mine to protect, Hart Goran says. Just as being Duke of my duchy means that its wealth and fortunes are mine to guarantee and grow. Now then, Kogas, if you'd be so kind. There are a few exclamations of surprise as four men that no one had noticed start laying down paper folders with their names on them. You'll pardon me for being so old school with the documents, but I don't want them to end up on some random server by accident. Most of this is looking like it's publicly available. Is there a reason you want this concealed? Simply put, while most of this is publicly available, it isn't all together to show the pattern. The pattern that multiple parties are working together or merely in tandem to outright cripple the economy of my duchy. Hart Goran says, the knock-on effect of all these patents, deals, and agreements falling through in rapid succession would break the economy, Hart Goran says, and he has everyone's attention. Thankfully, we've caught this before it can truly affect us. We have some time left to continue production and find a solution, which I believe I have. Being? Most of my steel production comes from the use of low-grade audiobook warfire. The process has a patent from Micronic blooming production. They are under control of the Farlet. Yes, however, you will notice on the final page I have a solution for you, ma'am, Duke Goran says, and her eyebrows go up and she turns to it. The Erumenta released axiom-based... Wait, this process is nearly identical. The only difference between the Micronic method and this open-source method released millennia ago is what things are referred to as call your warfire. And he checks the note on his communicator. A natural axiom thermal expression, and you can continue your business without bothering with any patent agreements. This will potentially damage my sales with, there will be a tax cut for anyone that agrees to go with this to make up for incidental dips in things, and there will be a subsidy from my private coffers to reimburse the price of retooling your corporations and factories. They want us to lose money? Well, too bad. There are ways around their traps, and there are ways to keep making money despite them. In the end, I expect that many of the expired agreements will have the other party demanding, if not begging, to renew them. How so? Think about it. They're sacrificing profit to try and take ours. If we simply keep making money, then the sacrifice play becomes pointless. So this whole meeting is you making sure we all keep making money and giving us a tax cut to work with you and subsidies if it costs us to do so? Basically, I'm in. I figured it. It's all upside. Why did you have to bring us here to your estate, though? This could be done over a conference call. Conference calls can be hacked into, offices can be bugged. I don't want the people on the other end of this having any warning until they realize that all they've done is shot themselves in the foot in their failed attempt to cripple us. There's some chuckles around the room. Play with blades and bleed, Hart Guran says smugly as his gaze drifts to the ancient family blade. He smirks. He knows they would approve. OOCS Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 129, Not Exactly Hidden. They know, Koga remarks. Already? And how have you figured it out? Well, your enemies have names and large estates of their own. With gardens, the forest is always listening, and so are we. Remind me not to make an enemy of you and yours, Hart Guran states. I doubt you'll be so foolish. Daiju dismisses. Still, things are already out. Oh, I know, but what they can legally do and what they can't legally do are different. And if they step outside of the law for the next part, then they're no longer protected by it. And a strong example of whoever or whatever is sent will case them to pause, Hart Guran says before considering. I may have to get my hands dirty, in the most literal of ways, in the next step. What are you planning? That depends entirely on my detractors, but today I must close my wives and ensure that I know exactly where all of them stand. One of Sarla, one of Farley, and one of Darv. All three of these families have made moves against you. I also have suitors from other duchies and baronies all over Serbo, and some from the colonies as well, to say nothing of alien propositions trying to get in good with the Apuk as a whole. So, there's a stigma against Apuk nobles and non-Apuk peoples pairing. Aim. Yes and no. It's an unspoken standard and an unfortunate one. If the alien is high enough in rank and capacity, then it's seen as a good catch. A bit of the Takra's eugenic aspirations rubbing off on us. Hart Guran explains, and there are no good candidates? I'm sure if I look hard enough, there will be plenty. The galaxy is enormous, to put it simply. But first, before I go off looking to bring another into things, I must first ensure that who I am already bound to are loyal, or at the very least, know where they stand. Meaning I will be speaking with Holly, formerly of the Darv, Yira, formerly of the Sarla, and Vanth, formerly of the Farley, Hart Guran says before considering. Also, I would like to speak with your Undaunted. While it would not be a good long-term solution to join with the Dark Forest, helping brush up on the family combat arts and test myself. Examples need to be made, and they'll be 1,000-fold stronger if it's done by my own hand. There is currently a combat maniac among us. He won't be here much longer, but if all you're looking for is a quick test of your skills and some advice on where to go next, a man that pushes himself against battle princesses and goddesses is far from a bad choice. Really? Has he bested either? I'm not sure if you can call his win against a battle princess a true win. He relied heavily on a defensive brand to stop their warfire from cooking him through. But if the warfire were taken out of the equation, her probably would have won. That's like asking for the cannons to be taken off a starfighter or the dark forest from a sorcerer, Hart Guran notes. Still, with your help here, I've relied too heavily on the Empress for aid as is. I need to stand strong. I am the Duke of Guran, a figure of power and authority, not a charity case. If you say so. There are 100 duchies interspersed throughout Serbo. Not counting the dark forest, I have a larger domain than most in control, and again, Putting aside the dark forest, I control nearly 2% of our world's landmass, either directly or through my baronesses. A full 2%? Guran is a mountainous duchy, and we are considered the masters of the mountains going down, Hart-Guran says. A lot of it is traditionally impractical to build on, and most of it is used for mining, but it's still a large piece of land. Not the most fertile, but among the most defensible from traditional armies. So big, self-defending, and due to size alone, even if money wasn't the objective, you're still a prize and a half. After all, the mountains get in the way of a lot of trade, or used to, so a lot of importance is on Guran. Yes, and it's time to remind our neighbors that Guran won their seat through sheer martial skill. That friend of yours? Call him. I will be training to do battle as soon and as often as possible. Hart-Guran says before checking his communicator. I'll get him here as soon as possible. Thank you. Now I need to prepare. There is much to do. Zana and Zeni were leading her to her husband and lord. Yira Guran, formerly Yira Sarla, was cautious. 4 years ago, he must have overheard her speak with her family, for he had grown distant, quiet, and cold. Not unkind, but always busy, always working, and with less and less time for anything other than the duchy. There is the sound of blade upon blade nearby as they move towards the proper manor. Oh, fresh heads on the walls. Being wed to a man that was more war lady than pampered princeling still awed her somewhat. Had she been so foolish as to have a child the moment she was capable, then her husband would be younger than her own daughters. But as it stands, sisters, she says as she sees Halya Guran and Vantha Guran waiting outside the manor. They are watching something as the sound of blade upon blade continue. Good. You're doing well to remember that, a strange man's voice suddenly says as the ringing stops. What? But I just stomped on your foot while trying to get past your defenses. Hart-Guran's voice can be heard now, halting and tired sounding. Exactly, you've remembered that you yourself are my opponent, and I am your opponent. The weapon is something you need to get past to get at me, and yours is a tool you use to do that and do damage when you get there. And you did. You kept my sword occupied and actually hurt me with that stomp. That was good, the man says as Yira Guran walks up close enough to see a Tret. No, a human sparring with her husband and Duke. Neither of them have shirts on, but where Hart-Guran is clearly strong and well-formed, the human is made of skin stretched over braided wire wrapped around a skeleton. But his face is so very oddly plain. It's almost like an axiom effect to make him uninteresting, but she senses no axiom around his face. And that's all three of them. You can have your break now, the human says as he walks away. It's only now that Yira Guran notices the bandages wrapping around his upper left arm and the strangely still axiom around it. Something is hidden there. But what? My wives, please come in. We have much to discuss. Oh, do we? I had assumed we had been placed aside, as how in the past 4 years you have barely spoken to any of us. Considering you were speaking to your families on ways to incorporate Guran into your own lands, I think you can forgive that precaution. We are here to discuss exactly that. I am pushing back. I have stabilized my lands and people, and fully understand the scope of the threat I face. Therefore, I fully intend to counter and crush it. There are only a few questions remaining, and one of the most prevalent is the question of what is to be done with you three. Each of you have been tasked by your families to try and subsume mine. Yet you are also part of mine. So I need to know, truly and fully, where you stand. There is a whistle from the human, and Hart-Guran turns to him in time to catch a shirt tossed his way. Yes, I remember. Dairon, there will be mercy to those who openly admit to prioritizing their own families over the Guran. I know familial loyalty, I applaud it as well. I will not punish it, so long as you recall that you are a part of both families now. I will not ask any of you to turn against your families, but I will ask all of you to remember that you are part of Guran now. Through your daughters, you are bound to these lands, not as much as I or they, but bound nonetheless. So are you, or are you not angry with us? Halya Guran asks. I am, Hart-Guran says simply. I understand exactly why all three of you were approached by and accepted the missions from your families to subvert mine. But I am telling you now to let it lie. That's it? Vaughan asks. Yes. To be frank, there is no way to assure your loyalty, not legally and not morally. But understand this, at this point all I ask is that you do not work against me or your own children. Once the danger has passed, all will be forgiven. And if that is too much, well, his gaze shifts from them to the ghoulish decorations upon the walls. You would do so to us as well? I will do as such to any creature, entity, or person that thinks they can harm my family without consequence. If the Empress herself were to try it, then I would do all in my power to put her on a spike. Granted, I would likely end up on one myself for even attempting such a thing, but I would still attempt it. Hartgorn says, and again Uragorn is struck by just how young he is, how authentically young he is, yet how tired he is as well. The phrase worn to the bone seems to be appropriate here. But it's not exhaustion, it's hardness. It just looks like exhaustion, a wariness that you'd see on girls who had come back from some kind of campaigns, from multiple wars. Today's spar was likely the only time in years he so much as held a weapon, but he still looks like he's fresh off his third campaign and in desperate need for peace. I'm not sure if it's a bold statement or a humble one to say, you'd honestly make a try for the Empress if she tried to down the Guran. A new voice says, and Uragorn and her sister wives look around for the source. Oh, my apologies. I'm just so comfortable being unseen, I'm generally invisible by reflex. Then there is a sense of movement, and everyone turns in time to see a man clad in dark greens and blues drop down in their midst. They look up to try and find where he came from, but there was no angle on his fall, just straight down and into a crouching position. Then he stands up. He's not the tallest and very slight of frame, but aside from his glasses, he looks more like a woodland shadow got up and started walking around. Please excuse me, the shadow says as he moves between them in an utterly silent step. There is no axiom to him, none at all. His presence does not exist in the axiom, nor does it disturb it. That he stands behind Hartgorn, along with the human, is telling. Likely the shadow is a human as well. She considers for a moment before sighing. She fishes out a pendant she wears under her dress. The old war symbol of the Sarla is a white circle within a white diamond backed by black cloth, or in the case of the pendant, polished marble circle within a diamond shape of polished marble. I am the fourth daughter of a sixth daughter of a 10th daughter. My path to Sarla succession would need to be through a river of family blood. I received no training in politics or designs of the Sarla, and was provided only my education and a job before we were wed. My family has not pressured me beyond the occasional question, because they expect nothing. I am less an asset and more an add-on. A footnote, she says before she channels axiom into her fingers. I'm not an idiot. I know where in the middle of this I stand. Training or not, the pendant crumbles in her grip. She walks up beside Hartgorn and stands beside him. I am wed to the head of, and have mothered the next generation of Guran. My fate is here. They call our families the Four Circles. Neighbors to each other that all have a circle prominent in our crests. Vaughan says as she holds out her own pendant. Bright blue with two triangles impaling one another within a circle to form a small diamond and a number of triangles within the circle. Polished stone as well, but painted to get the right color. Can't be the four circles of us if one is destroyed. Besides, with my latest cousin being born, I think I'm 200th and 94th in line. Oh goodness, what a hard choice, Haley Guran notes as Vaughan crushes her own pendant and moves to stand beside Hartgorn. Never inherit anything because no one dies, and there's a literal army in front of me in line or be on the ground level for a rebirth. Decisions. You should have called us out years ago. We'd be done and past this by now if you had. The symbol of Darv crumbles in Haley Guran's fingers, and she walks up to Hartgorn, who looks like he's somehow dropped a war's worth of trauma and is only a veteran of 2 campaigns rather than 3. We're in, you understand? Let us in, let us help, and by every goddess there is, Haley Guran says before grabbing her husband by the horns and pulling him up for a kiss. Some passion, looks like we need to get him those books, the human says, turning to the shadow, who chuckles. Hojojutsu is a respectable art. Hojojutsu? The human asks. His eyes go back and forth as his mind visibly processes things and tries to sort it. He then turns to the shadow with a grin. How the hell does Koga not have a legion of aunts and uncles? Birth control, the shadow states simply, and the human snorts. OOCS, Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 130, Love and Longing. So do you think our mutual friends are having a good time? Vernon asks as he's spotted by a barless woman who immediately turns around and starts going the other direction, which is a problem as she's supposed to be on patrol if that police uniform is anything to go by. Things are certainly shaking up in Alarush, although with how much in the way of aid the Empress has offered Duke Garan, there's no way to know if he'll ever find his way out of debt. Sunk cost. At this point, he likely considers himself drowning in debt no matter what. And with the way the Empress typically acts, she's not going to just suicide him and his against something. She was already his master as his Empress. If the control she has is personal as well as political, it really doesn't change much. She was in charge before, she's in charge now. An interesting point of view. Think of it like your own ennobling, my love. As a citizen of Serbo, you were under the command of the Empress, and her decisions affected you personally. But as a battle princess, she has a much stronger grip. But at the same time, you're in the same grip, just with different expectations. And for it being so firm a grip, I spent years roaming from star to star, practically on paid vacation, so long as I comported myself. And what did that do for your opinion of her grip on you? I'd fight to stay in it, Miro Noir states, and Vernon nods. And she's doing the same thing here. After all, that is the sort of thing we wouldn't see even a week ago. Vernon notes as a nearby screen at the food court shows the trial and deliberation of numerous women who have been discovered acting against Guren in its interests. Above the judge is a balcony that reveals Hart Guren sitting there, watching the entire proceeding, putting the fear of the Duke into the lawyers, judge and defendants. Oddly enough, though, he hasn't actually used his authority to overrule anything yet, merely watched. Merely made absolutely certain to get the measure of the people below him. According to the whispers around the food court that Vernon can easily hear, he had interrupted in the past, but now, with his wives behind him, he had seemingly calmed down. It's an interesting game he's playing, Vernon notes. You see it too? I do, Vernon confirms. Acting calmer with his wives behind him makes the duchy and the surrounding duchies think that they have control of him and are working to their benefit, Miro Noir notes. Which is funny considering all three of them have bound themselves to Guran and not the other way around, Vernon mutters. Politics, half the game is perception, Miro Noir says with a smile, and everyone plays along with it until you remind them that you have a sharp piece of metal and they need to remember their manners, money or not, Vernon states. Don't be crass now. Sorry, my love. I just remember that silly negotiation we were sent to last week. It's cute how many duchesses and baronesses forget that, despite their leashes being nice and loose to let them run around, they're still on a leash and a battle princess is no showpiece. Oh? So you don't think that your own reputation as a sorcerer helped? Miro Noir asks. I think, my love, that between the two of us, it was your beautiful prowess that truly intimidated them. I was merely your arm candy, he says, and she titters. Oh, I don't know. After I reminded her that there was a blade, she looked ready to run. Then she spotted a certain someone coughing like a fool due to inhaling my drink in the exact wrong way at the exact wrong time. Vernon reminds her, and she leans into him with a slight laugh. So it wasn't deliberate? No, the mysterious bit of axiom used right after that was my teleporting things out of my throat so I wouldn't end up coughing all over the place to clear it. And yet she thought you were conjuring a mysterious and terrible power to do horrible things to her. The worst I was going to do at that time was spit wine over that overly expensive rug of hers. You mean the massive self-portrait of a floor tapestry? The place I was standing was near the head, and goodness knows how she would have reacted if I started coughing that red wine onto her face, Vernon remarks, and she titters. Well, a mouthful might be explainable. You are lowborn after all. Go back far enough and everyone is. Whoop-de-doo, he replies. Yes, but poor manners are more easily excused from one such as you. My crass, blunt, and rough man you. That's almost hurtful, he notes. I'll make it up to you later, she promises with a quick kiss on his jaw. Still, it would have been a bad image if I suddenly coughed up a mouthful of red wine onto her floor tapestry. Well, you could have followed it with a torrent of blood if you wanted to intimidate her. Excuse me? You are the bloody prophet after all. Spew out a few gallons of blood, dab at your lips and apologize for your aversion to deception, and she likely would have fainted. Miro Noir offers and he scoffs. And what was she lying about? Oh, everyone lies about something if not to other than to themselves. Telling someone you can detect deception and putting pressure on them will get anyone to break in short order. My dearest Miro Noir, where did this mean streak come from? Where? It was always here, my Vernon. Perhaps I'm lacking a little in the way of, she begins to say, before he pulls her close in a gentle embrace and kisses her passionately. Maybe still a bit. He pulls her in again, and the area around them melts away. His hands trace circles through her silken dress to give her a back massage as she clings tightly to him. It takes them the better part of an hour to actually start paying attention to their surroundings again. Move your foot back, little buddy, Harold says, gently moving Zenegaran's foot an entire foot length back with a gentle nudge of his own. Give yourself a more stable stance. How is it more stable to stand so wide, she asks, and he gives her a gentle push on the shoulder. You felt how all your weight went to the back foot, right? Right. That's how. By having a wide stance, no matter which way you're pushed, you have something already there to take the weight, Harold explains. It also means that any way you need to go, you can push off and get moving right away. You don't need to take probing first step. You can just go. Really? So I just... she says before suddenly dashing to the side. That was easy. And that's why a solid stance is amazing. Oftentimes, the moment you break someone else's stance in a fight, you've already won. If they're off balance, then they can't dodge, deflect, or attack until they get it back. Not unless they're very good or using some pretty slick axiom tricks. Can you? She asks. Yes. Both ways. Yes. Really? Yes. Prove it. She challenges him. What with you? You don't know how to fight that well, Harold says, and she puts her fists on her hips. Kid, you're not that strong. She continues to glare at him, and he raises an eyebrow in amusement. If that thing goes any higher, it's going to vanish in your hair, she says, and he briefly contemplates some kind of axiom illusion over his face to mess with her, but decides against it. Herbert would, but he's not Herbert. But I also am Herbert, Harold mutters to himself before nodding. What? Zenegaran asks, and Zena looks at him confused as well. You both want a better demonstration? He asks, and they nod. All right, this is actually something really good to learn, so gather your sisters and I'll get my wives to show things off properly. Really? Yeah, it'll be fun, Harold says, and they both rush off as he brings out his communicator. So what's in this for you? Halegurin asks from behind before he can input any number in. What do you mean? What are you getting out of this? You're not on the Empress's payroll, or debt. You're not an ally of Goran, and while Apik and humans are on good terms, helping one of their children with nothing expected on your end is a bit much, Halegurin states. Really? Now are you asking because you think I may be a problem, or because you're suddenly in a position to help out and want to be seen helping? Harold asks, and she frowns. I'm not attacking, I'm just asking. I have half a decade of neglect to make up for. So you best bet that my daughters, stepdaughters, husband, and home are under my protections, she says, and he nods. Good. Keep that up. You're not upset. No, and you're not getting an answer to your first question. Not a direct one, at any rate, Harold says, and she looks confused for a moment before frowning. Why not? I'm a shit is why not. Now, if you'll excuse me, he says, speed dialing a number. Hey, gorgeous, how's it going? It's been less than 2 hours, Giria says in an amused tone. I'm on Serbo, competing with Mr. Lovey-Dovey himself down here. Honestly, anything short of worshipping the ground you walk on looks like neglect next to Vernon and his Miro Noir. We need to stick around for a while, see how far this can go. That depends on the ship, but on the reason of the call. You need a reason to call. That hurts, she teases. Hey, no guilting. Anyways, how do you feel about showing a bunch of little kids the do's and don'ts of a fight? They seem to need some help just to figure out why having a good stance is a good idea. Oh, that sounds like fun. But what will we be welcome? I hear that Garan has a reputation for heads going on spikes when he's upset. He's free to come and claim it if he thinks he's hard enough. Besides, I'm doing him a favor. I don't think that's a spike-worthy offense, Harold replies, and Haley Garan crosses her arms with a huff. It's not. Don't play him up to be some impalement, happy monster. Well, he has a reputation is all I'm saying, Harold says with a cheeky grin before he pointedly looks towards the decorations on the walls. And not an undeserved one. Oh, stop, he's not a monster. No, but I'm going to keep poking until someone snaps at me. Then I'm going to poke at them snapping at me, because I am a shit. Well, at least you admit it, Haley Garan says as she tries to make sense of the bizarre conversation she just had. And like whoosh sproing, he just bounces off the edge of the branch like it's all a big play place and swings down using another branch and doesn't even rip off a leaf as he does so. The young Apuk child explains to him as Observer Wu records the conversation. He had been brought to the hidden village in the dark forest and was recording a very messy and impromptu interview with the children residing there. It was going fairly well, mostly because there was enough earnestness and enthusiasm here that it damn near has physical presence. And how easily can you follow his obstacle courses? Not to mention, does it hurt when you fail? Say you don't jump hard enough, what do you land on? The forest keeps us safe. If we fall while running after him, we're just suddenly on the branch again and not falling. It's super weird, but no one's gotten hurt at all. So the forest itself, what's it like talking to it? I understand a few of you are sorcerers and can talk directly, but what's it like for the rest of you to live in and with a giant thing that's everything around you? He asks, getting to the heart of this interview. What does it mean to have a massive communal consciousness? Was it some kind of hive mind? The equivalent to having phones hooked up to one's head with privacy and data storage? Something else? Both perhaps? Neither? He needs some kind of answer as to just what in the hell this thing actually is. It talks sometimes. It does? Yeah, this way. It uses a tree over there for a face when it wants to speak to others. The children say, pointing to one of the trees bordering the large clearing. It's huge, vine-covered, and has a large series of bumps that vaguely suggest a face, but nothing more than that. Then as he's watching and as his body camera is pointed the right way, the tree shifts and the bumps move ever so slightly. But at the same time, they haven't moved at all. Nothing has changed position, but it's looking at him, looking directly at him without eyes, facing him without a face. Then the sensation is gone. There is a piercing whistle, and he turns to see Koga Daiju standing there in traditional Japanese garments, casually stuffing a pipe with some kind of herb. Sweet Kami, what a Kami! Not just feeling the mighty presence of the woods, but seeing it manifest to face you. Quite the thing, isn't it? He asks as he finishes tamping down his pipeweed and then lighting first his finger on fire, then the payload. He takes a deep draw of the pipe. But that has always been the way of the Kami. They do things in their own way. We can appease them, combat them, or live in harmony with them. There are more choices, of course, but those are the three most common. Which do you think is best? Clearly harmony, Observer Wu states, and Daiju nods sagely. I knew you were a smart man. That's the right answer, he says before breathing out a cloud of thick smoke from his nose. The cloud envelops him, and then is blown away to reveal he's still there. Bet you thought I was going to do a disappearing act, eh? Heh 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 heh. Always keep them guessing.